Welcome, fellow synthesizer sickos. I'm Vulture Culture, and tonight we're going to be comparing the Prophet 12 from 2013, I believe, and the Prophet 600 from 1983. So there's about 30 years that gap these two synthesizers in terms of what Dave Smith could do at the time, and they're both very cool, very fascinating instruments. And for me, the Prophet 12 is the newest synth I have, new to me in the studio. And I wanted to answer the question, what's in a vintage synthesizer versus something modern like this? So the Prophet 12 has 12 voices, Prophet 600 only has 6. Prophet 12 has digital oscillators that go far beyond just virtual analog stuff with wavetables and so forth. Whereas, of course, the Prophet 600 just has saw, square, triangle, and pulse width modulated waves. It actually doesn't even have noise. That's one of its omissions compared to its immediate predecessor, the Prophet 5. So we're going to compare. They both have analog Curtis filter chips, and they're different. The 3392, I want to say, is the chip number in here. And I don't exactly know what the chip number is for the Prophet 12. It's just like sort of the modern Dave Smith Instruments Curtis chip. But they're both incredible instruments. I'd be happy to own both of them. But it's going to be really interesting as we go through the filters and everything to check out where the magic is and what you guys think. So welcome tonight. Welcome if you're new here. Please subscribe if you haven't yet. Really helps keep the channel alive. So let's go ahead and initialize the synth. The easiest way to do that is just to go to global, and then 23 is basic patch right now, and we should have... I'm going to just bring down the volume a bit. And on this synth, the easiest way to do the exact same thing is actually just to do it with the knobs. So this synth is currently in manual mode, which is usually how I like to work. And that is as simple as just, pressing a few buttons, and we should be pretty close. And there we go. And they should be about volume matched. I set them up before the stream to try to get them right. So let's discuss the different oscillator sounds that we have going here. So let's start with the sawtooth. Conductive, welcome to the stream. So what are we hearing, guys? Also, can everybody confirm just that the stream is good, that the audio is fine? I hope so. So again, let's just cover the whole range now. Thank you, Rocky. Very interesting, isn't it, already? So what are we listening to? We are starting with a digital oscillator in the Prophet 12 and an analog oscillator, 3340. So the famous oscillators are in the Prophet 600 are actually the same oscillators in the Prophet 5 Rev 3. That's the original Prophet 5, not the reissue. Rev 3 came out around 80, I want to say. And it was also the same oscillator used in a bunch of synths like the Oberheim OBXA, so on and so forth. Oh, that's super cool. I didn't know that. Latch 1 plus hold. Okay, good to know. Make sure these are in tune. There we go. So immediately in this middle range section, I think you can begin to hear maybe the biggest drawback of the Prophet 12. It came out at a time before FPGA technology was a major thing. And you can hear that to avoid aliasing, these oscillators are not anywhere near as bright as the Prophet 600. Just that extension up into the high end. With the oscillators, though, you can definitely hear that there's not as much high end, which on a synthesizer like the Poly 6, I would be very excited about. I'd be like, ooh, it sounds so warm and fuzzy, right? Jupiter 4, warm and fuzzy. In this case, to me, it reminds me of the JP8000 in a bad way. You know, it's still a beautiful synth, don't get me wrong. I think this stream's going to be a little controversial. I think people who own Prophet 12s are going to be mad at me, and people who own Prophet 600s are going to be mad at me. That's okay. You know, just roast me in the comments, I suppose. I mean, it's actually kind of crazy, isn't it? Let's turn this oscillator on. It's both warmer and brighter, which is kind of crazy to think about. You really kind of hear where that oscillator is getting clipped off. I definitely think that is the sweet spot. I am quite happy to be hated. I'm never like a provocateur on YouTube. Like, have you ever noticed some of the other YouTube channels in this space and they like post something and it's like you could tell they're going for hate clicks? I'm never doing that. However, some of my opinions are going to stir some feelings in some people. So, that's a good point. And you know what's interesting is shooting out this synth versus the Oberheim Matrix 6. I did not like that this synth sounded so bright. In this example, though, this synth just sounds fuller. You know, like I don't know what the descriptor I would use beyond fullness. Balanced is another one that comes to mind. You know, when you first play a Moog synth and you hear those Moog oscillators and you feel like it's got the low end covered, it's got the warmth in the mids covered, it's got the bite in the upper mids, and it's got the airiness on the top. I'm hearing that from the oscillators on this synth. This one rather closed off. Just a lot more weight. Let's go ahead and just shave off the beginning, like Dub was saying. Okay, so that's pretty close in terms of having this filter all the way up. You'll notice my cutoff is actually below 5 of 10 values over here on the Prophet 600, just to give you an idea of how high this filter goes. And it also doesn't go as low, which could be considered a flaw. Oh, yeah, there we go. That's pretty close again. We're in the ballpark there. So let's try this one. slightly dark here. The synth just is more of a, you really do get that, just that the brightness and the fullness from the Prophet 600. I'm not entirely surprised that an actual analog synth oscillators would have a little bit more presence to them than a virtual analog oscillator section. So let's go ahead and bring oscillator 2 in. We'll bring its output level up. And until we add a little bit of slop, and it really don't take much. Let's bring this and bring the fine tune. So what we're going to do is try to match the slop of a DSI synth. So this is kind of like pre-vintage knob. If you were to get a Rev 2, OBX8, Prophet 6, all of those types of modern sequential synths, they'll have a vintage knob which affects a lot of parameters, envelopes, the filter and stuff to add some randomization in. With this generation of DSI instruments or Dave Smith instruments, slop was only affecting the oscillators. And so you'll notice that on an actual analog synth, and these are voltage controlled analog oscillators, they're never perfectly in tune. You'll notice that as I cycle through the voices, we get different amounts of beating between the oscillators. So to try to match that, so oscillator slop 15. All keys pro, I love a good Manhattan. So I would say oscillator slop 15. Is pretty close. You could maybe even dial it back a little bit, but I don't mind it being a little wild in this comparison. Now let's add some detune. So let's do, I think that's about 10 cents worth of detune. Let's take, we're on oscillator 2 now and tune that up 10 cents. So it's so weird. Now I have the resonance up maybe. Now the Prophet 12 sounds brighter. There could be some clipping on my microphone. I'm using a cable that's got a lot of noise, it sounds like. If you're hearing clipping on the synths, if it's coming across as distortion, that's probably YouTube compression. It is better when you're not watching it live. That just is what it is. There's nothing I can really do about YouTube's compression algorithms. I'm now leaving 2 whole decibels of top end into these live streams of headroom. That way we don't get the worst of the MP3 compression, but it's still just part of YouTube for sure. No, I think it's psychoacoustically, if you play one oscillator at a time. they're pretty close. I think what it might have to do is the way that when you combine multiple oscillators on the Prophet 12, multiple voices, it sounds like it generates more high end. It might have something to do with the aliasing. If it is aliasing, it's very beautiful. It's not a bad thing. Definitely a more focused upper mid-range. That's starting to sound very bright in a good way. Little bit of overhyped high end, but I don't mind it. Let's check the low end now. Down low. To my ears, I'm still hearing a little bit more life. So let's try oscillator slop 20 and see. And you do hear that clipped high end a little bit on the low end of the Prophet 12. Delicate sizzle at the top, but in the mid-range, it's very close. Still kind of winning for me in terms of if I had to pick a flavor, I would go with this flavor. It's a little fuller, but it's really good on both sides. It could, Walter, the new electronics could definitely be a thing. Passive House Australia, welcome to the stream. How's it going? I think it's that they are digital oscillators, and we're hearing both that an individual oscillator has a little bit less high end. This is something Madeira pointed out in his review of the synth, that the high end isn't quite there, probably to avoid aliasing. And with FPGA-based oscillators, like in the Modulus, in Novation, Summit, and Peak, in the Udo, Super Gemini, synths like that, those oscillators are running at such a high sample rate that the errors that occur from using a digital oscillator happen way, way, way above human hearing. So they're essentially perfect. Whereas this generation of essentially 90s technology put in a 2013 synth is not quite as clear. It's still a beautiful sounding synth. I don't want people to get me wrong, but I do think you can hear a bit of a difference. So why don't we jump into the filter now and get involved with some filter sweeps. So something we have on this so this filter over here, we've just got a 4-pole 3392 filter. Over here, we have a 4-pole and a 2-pole mode. So the difference here being and there is aliasing you can hear there too, which is super fascinating. So let's try to just match that. Very clean low end here. Here you can hear the aliasing. Little machine whine. I like that sound. I have no problem with that. I think it sounds beautiful. Could you guys hear that little machine whine type of a sound? Not a bad thing in my opinion. I quite like the sound of that. Let's go ahead and I'm going to do 6/6 and we'll just do 6/6/6, right? Sustain all the way up. 6 attack, 6 decay, sustain all the way, release at 6 also. Oh, I think I might have had this off a little bit. So let me just make sure here I've got this right. Yeah, that sounds about right. So envelope amount all the way up. resonance. Envelope amount all the way up. Attack, decay, sustain, release. Glad to hear it's working for you, Adapt. How's it going, Sebastian? Just trying to match these envelope shapes here. So that's pretty close. Let's go ahead and increase the resonance. Now, the resonance on this synth gets crazy fast. Everything about the Prophet 12 is better in terms of balance as far as the user interface and parameter scaling and things like that. So when you twist the resonance knob here, you get very musically useful values spaced out nicely. Wherever you are in the spectrum there, whereas over here, very quickly, I think not far past 5% or 5, halfway. Yeah, I think at resonance 6, you're already at like absolute max self-oscillation. So not worth it. So let's just start with, I'll start with the Prophet 600 and try to match it with the 12 because this is the more temperamental of the two. Nice meaty growl to that. Well, that was weird. So you can see how touchy some of these knobs are on the Prophet 600. People who are familiar with the deep lore of this show will know that I am conflicted with the Prophet 600. It is a great vintage synthesizer. It's the cheapest vintage synth you can get with 2 voltage controlled oscillators per voice with hands-on controls like this. But it's for me the tweakiness of these envelope shapes, even with the Glee mod, make it not my favorite synth, and I typically don't go to it quickly just for that reason alone. But when it comes to the actual sound here, listening to this deep bass, feels rather clinical at the top. Maybe we need a little more resonance. Yeah, I agree with you, Sebastian. This definitely has a little bit more thickness, more wilderness to the sound. So now we're going close to self-oscillation. So what are we hearing, guys? What are the biggest differences between these two synthesizers in terms of the character of the filters? I do agree with Seb that, you know, they both have Curtis chips. They're both similar in terms of the resonance characteristics similar, but I wonder if you guys are hearing a very obvious difference to me, if it's coming through the YouTube compression to you guys. So what I'm listening for, Passive House Australia, is I want to hear the differences between these two filters, because the core elements that make up the sound of a synthesizer are the oscillators and the filters. And for me, that's where the magic is. And I've found I favor instruments that have oscillators that inspire me and filters that inspire me. Now, not always the case. I mean, in terms of the Prophet 12, there's so much more to this synth. We've got tuned feedback. We have a high pass filter with resonance. We have a multi, it can be 4-pole or 2-pole. We've got a whole character section I didn't even talk about when it comes to the oscillator area. So for instance, if we're feeling that the oscillators are a little beefier on the Prophet 600, if you play the top notes, I don't find as much, because there's not as much to sweep at the top notes. See if I play. There's not as much room. I actually did a video called How to Listen to Filters over on the Polyverse Music channel that kind of goes into the rationale of focusing on low notes for filters. Yeah, but the thing is, hey, Crystal Love, how are you doing? Yeah, so Crazy Beats is pointing out, yes, the Prophet 12, a little more nasal from Dub Station here. We could also do that, Mr. Cow Food. So let's turn the girth up on the oscillators. And I think, is it the same on both? Or do you have to do it separately? Oscillator 2 if I go to girth. Yeah, so I think it's just global. So let's max that out. Touchy envelopes. So I'm using the girth at, I don't know, what is that, like 2 o'clock? I'm still getting more. Wow, the growl on this synth is really good. I'm still getting more brightness too. So let's go ahead and add some air. We'll add about 2/3 air too. So. Greg, how's it going? I have both of these sequential circuit synths. And don't worry about it, Passive House Australia. I think it's a perfectly fair question to ask. What are we even fucking doing here? Are we just losing our minds listening to filter sweeps? No, this is the best way to go, I think, to determine the raw clay of a synthesizer, to be able to, because my thing is, listening to any synth on its own, you're going to get, every synthesizer sounds great on its own, especially through some effects. They all sound great. It has to be an exceptionally bad synth to sound terrible, especially if you've got a great effects pedal or something like that. Especially similar synthesizers, but sometimes even when you do it with dissimilar synths, it can reveal a lot to you about what's going on, because I keep using the word magic. On some level, I don't believe there's anything magical about synthesizers, but I do think there are nuances to oscillators, filters, even the amplifiers that add up to an overall perception of a certain instrument having this legendary tone, this feeling that grabs you by the heartstrings, So that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to sort this out, and I think this is a sort of a channel for people who are equally as lost as I am, as deep into the weeds as I like to get. And luckily, we have a bunch of them here. So can I get a scum cheers for everybody who hangs out every Wednesday night here? I really appreciate you guys. You've changed my life, and cheers. Yes, they do the free 3-frame tables. I don't love the sound of the air. So I've been holding it back just to see if anybody in chat would catch it, but what I'm hearing is the biggest difference between these two filters is resonance compensation. So what is resonance compensation? Well, if you go back to these synth, like the Jupiter 4, Mini Moog, lots of Prophet 5, those synthesizers, when you crank the resonance, the signal falls away. I believe it's something of a psychoacoustic effect where the volume into the filter is the same, actually. It's just that as that resonant peak comes forward, it sort of pushes the other signal back. Something like that. I'd have to ask Asaf from Polyverse exactly what's happening there. But what they started doing in later synthesizers is as you crank the resonance, they also push more of the level into the filter. And so you get more squish to the sound. The resonant peak is more integrated into the actual synth signal, the oscillator signal. So even though you get that characteristic growl shriek of the resonance, you also get more of the oscillator. So now I've heard that, I've said that, listen and you should be able to hear. Let's add a little bit more slop then. So oscillator 1, let's make sure we've got about 20. I might have only put slop on one oscillator, so let's try it on, make sure I have it on both. Yeah, let's see if that makes it a little fatter for you guys. Because you're right, this is a little bit more fat sounding. Let's put, let's do slop up to 25 on, let's go fucking 30. Let's take it too far and then we can always pull it back if it starts getting out of hand, right? I found that going past that, you get into some weird territory. And let's just make sure that we're driving these oscillators as hard as we can into the filter. they're getting very close with driving the oscillators. Let's use the actual drive section and see if we can get even closer. That's 40 drive. I think we finally done it, guys. I think we finally matched them. We got like a bad slop where they were really in tune. Okay, so we finally kind of cracked the code on how to get the Prophet 12 to sound as good as the Prophet 600 raw, which is to crank the drive and the oscillator slop on both of them. Let's take oscillators 2 tuning up to 20 cents, and then same thing over here. We're going to take it up to 20 cents, and we'll do some chord sweeps now. They both sound very good, don't they? I really can't, you can't knock it, can you? One thing you can hear is how much compared to, say, modern vintage mode on a sequential synth, slop assigns a random value. I think there is some slow LFO going on, but then there's also just like a random detune value added every time you press a note, which is a certain kind of sound. I like it, but it gives you unpredictable results, more so than on a vintage synth. All the way up there just to make sure that we're getting the goodness. That's right. Multi-poly is going to have a more accurate to analog sort of thing. With slop, it's interesting. It's good, but I think we might have gone a little too far. But in this case, it does sound good with the Prophet 12 just to have that difference. So. So funny how touchy the envelopes are on this guy, though. Sounds good. Maybe a little more resonance now. It's very close. It's very close. But, you know, there's a little bit of clarity that I like to the Prophet 600. It's always meaty sounding. That filter is just driven hard. Now, once you introduce the drive from the Prophet 12 into the equation, I think you start to get something really cool. Let's take the attack down on both of these guys, and we're going to give ourselves more of a pluck. That's the same D tune. The difference on those two notes we just heard was slop. I think it's fair to say we could take the slop down from, let's take it down to like 25 on both of them. I think 30 is a little much. That's okay. Let's see what we get. You can hear on the Prophet 12 that resonance is still not as integrated as it is on the Prophet 600, which isn't a bad thing, by the way. One of my favorite synthesizers of all time is the Korg Poly 6. And the Poly 6 has a filter more like the Prophet 12, where when you crank the resonance, it just has this singing quality. It just leaps out. I think of synths that have less resonance compensation as having a more feminine character, a more sing-song delicate au revoir to them. Whereas this synthesizer is almost Oberheim-like in its levels of meat. Absolutely deal with that, Damien. The stream will be here for when you get back. I hope that dog's okay. Mr. Cowfood says, I'll try to explain a bit. Turn filter envelope down to 0 on both. Keep resonance high and sweep the cutoff down by hand slowly. Chromatic filter tuning should arise once is steppier. So no, that won't happen actually on either of these synths, interestingly. So on something like a Prophet 6, a newer synth than the Prophet 12, Dave Smith chose to use chromatic stepping on the filter. And what that was designed to do was enable users to be able to tune the filter for those types of patches like organ patches and things like that, where you would want to have the filter, you're playing the filter, and maybe you want it to be a fifth or a fourth or an octave up above the oscillators with key tracking all the way, something like that. And so when you change the cutoff on a Prophet 6, it steps. And that is not the case on this synth. When you move the filter here, it's extremely smooth. It's very perfectly smooth. Now, what's interesting is that on a original unmodified Prophet 600, you would have filter stepping, which had nothing to do with chromatic notes. That is, they were not in tune. They simply were the 128 values of MIDI, right? So the cutoff had 128 values, something like that. This one has values from 0 to 99, I guess. And if we listen to this, this is a Gleegly modified synthesizer. You could hear that we actually have no filter stepping either. So when Gleegly modified the code for the Prophet 600, they eliminated filter stepping and enabled you to have smooth filter control. So that was a long-winded way of saying that actually there is such a thing as chromatic stepping on Dave Smith instruments, but not on this one. So, or on either of these. And there's sort of a different version of each one of those. So that was like a little silly thing. Sorry for taking so long. Why don't we jump out of the this section? So something you can do on a Prophet 600, for instance, is you can turn, say, the triangle waves on and the sawtooth waves. So a lot like a Juno synthesizer, we can actually mix wave shapes, which I don't believe we can do on the Prophet 12. Not exactly. Now, of course, we have 4 oscillators. So in that sense, we could load a triangle wave and a sawtooth wave onto those. But on a single oscillator, you can't do that. There's so many things this synth could do. And whenever I do these types of comparisons, I always sort of pare down to the feature set of the more impoverished synthesizer as far as features go. What else could we do? We could go to pulse width modulation. So let's jump over there. Let's turn the resonance down. And where's my synth? Oh, I have... What's happening there is if I turn the pulse width modulation off. Let's just start with that. No pulse width modulation. We'll go to oscillator 1 here and just change the shape to pulse waves on both of these guys. So see how that sounds? Let's increase the fine tune a bit on this. So we could do cross mod, absolutely. We'll make some pads. I think this is, we're going into kind of like the poly territory. And a poly synth, if we just add a little attack right to the amplifiers here. I love that they do kind of follow the same sort of shape and general gist. It's very easy to program both of them at the same time. So here's the fucking thing about this synth that I hate, which is you can hear that when I've played a note, right, we get an attack. If I play that again, sometimes even though I have attack, it just doesn't, it's sort of like... It's like once you've triggered a note, the attack is no longer present. Maybe that's something to do with the release, like if I turn the release all the way down. I think what's happening is as long as there's a release stage... Yeah, I think that's what it is. If there's any release whatsoever, it will ignore the attack stage. And this is the thing that really frustrates me, and I'm not aware that the Gleegly mod fixes this, or if there's like an option in the synth to do that. Whereas over here, doesn't matter how much release you have, always going to fade in the note. I have to like fucking say this to you. That's worth it. alone. Like, I don't care how magical this vintage analog synth is. That one thing drives me up the fucking wall, and it kills the synth for me. There's a, it's just like a finicky synth, but that sort of behavior is unacceptable in this house. So for me, yeah, the square waves sound gorgeous, compared to this. I think on the Prophet 12 we're really hearing more accurate square waves. I'd be willing to bet that if we looked at a harmonic analysis of these square waves, we'd be getting some even harmonics as well. There's no fix that I'm aware of. So yeah, it's a frustrating thing. There are other synths that work like that, like my Roland SH2, old analog synth. If your release is still going, the attack just doesn't trigger. It might have even been a deliberate design choice as far as the team went. I don't know. Considering how buggy the original version of the synth was, I don't think I would expect that to be the case. But my point is that it's just a super fucking frustrating thing. Anyways, now if we put this into pulse width mode, pulse width PWM, immediately sounds gorgeous. To do the same thing, I believe, is a little bit more complicated here. So we'll go to assign mod source and hold this and go to frequency LFO1, assign mod destination, and we're on oscillator 2 shape mod. And then we need to add some amount to that, and I think we can add a pretty good amount to it. And just slow the frequency down there, because that's a little crazy, right? Going back to assign mod source, and again, just grab that same LFO. Let's see, let's go down one and then assign mod source and then grab LFO1. Does that work? Okay, I don't know why that's not working, but we just use the exact same thing and go to oscillator 2 shape mod and kind of add the same amount. We might be hearing a difference because of the drive. So if we turn drive off, let's hear how that sounds. Nah, it's not a legato mode on this. There is a mode for that, but... All right, so... Back into the mod matrix, let's increase the amount here of LFO1 to shape mod. So we're just getting more pulse width modulation. Something like this. So we can go all the way through 0 here. It seems like we can't just, or we might be able to if I go in and I adjust the shape mod on these. Oh no, we can't. Here's another interesting quirk of the Prophet 600. For whatever reason, the way the LFO seems to work with this synth is it has kind of like a 2 sine wave shape where the first doesn't go as high as the second one. I have no idea why that would be either. This is another one of the quirks of this vintage synth. You'll notice that on one peak of the wave of that LFO, we go through here. On the second one, you don't. Whereas Whereas here we have a more typical LFO shape, like up and down, just like a regular sine wave. Yes, I mean, one of the things is a sort of like a referendum on vintage versus modern synths in a way where I mean, for me, I actually like the sound of the Prophet 600 still better. To answer that question, Aquatic, I don't really know, but I would assume so. And then the LFO thing, I agree with Nick, where it's like a bonus. Another synth that displays kind of similar behavior is this Chroma Polaris just off camera here, where you can really hear how that synth has like a unique PWM sort of sound, and that's a part of what makes the synth great. I don't love the PWM on the Prophet 12, to be honest with you guys. I think it sounds okay. And if we turn the resonance down and open the filter all the way up, for instance, let's do the same thing over here for fun. So you could really hear what I'm talking about with that interesting way that the LFO moves there, right? Actually sounds really beefy in a nice way there. I love that. And I think this kind of comes back to the way this filter interacts. Keith, I think it's emulating it. I think all of the stuff going on with the Prophet 600 is digital control. I'm sure the amp is analog, but I think the envelopes are digital, and they're just not great. Another thing you'll keep noticing that is a little thing that once you hear it, it bothers you is the release. Starsky Carr has a video on this. Whereas like the release on a Prophet 5 just has a smooth taper. With this synth, it's kind of like an exponential taper, and then it just drops off. And I'll let you hear that real quick. It's just like it just gets out of there like a 909 crash. It just put a bunch of reverb on it and shit, and maybe it's fine. But for me, it's another one of those things. You'll hear vintage synth snobs. Can I get some scum snobs in the chat? Talk about envelopes all the time. GX3P envelopes are so slow because they're digital. Back in my day, all the poly synths. The thing is, though, I've never, ever really cared about envelopes on any synthesizer. I've thought they've all been great. Thank you, guys. But the thing about this synth is there's just something about the way the envelopes are that are not to my liking, and I think could be objectively called errors on the parts. And I think Legally did his best, bless him, but it doesn't mean that the synth is completely up to snuff compared to something like a flagship, like the Prophet 12 or the Prophet 5, which it's of course inheriting from. Now it's got almost the exact same filters and filters and oscillators as the Sequential T8, but that had a different processor that they could really trick out. I think it might have had a dual processor in it that was very powerful, and so they were able to basically get everything they wanted out of that synth. And even though that synth came out the year after this synth, it was actually, so I think this was 1982, it was actually the Prophet 600 was borrowed from the development of the T8. So while they were working on the T8, it was just such a massive undertaking that they realized we could take a lot of what we've already developed. And you can see the same sort of thing happening with like a modern Behringer, for instance. They've been working on the DS80, their version of the CS80 clone, and they seem to have been kind of stuck and not be able to get there all the way. So you've seen them borrowing that technology and putting polyphonic aftertouch in UBXA and Oberheim synth, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And now they're taking CS80 filters and putting it on a Yamaha DX1 style synth. So it's just a good example of, how synth companies, sometimes when they're up against the gun, they're like, let's get a product out. I think the Prophet 600 is great. I just want everybody to know that. It is a great synth. If you were to only own one vintage synth, this would not be a bad one. I am spoiled for choice. I mean, look at the room. It's just crazy in here. So I'm very, very lucky. The 800 through a modular envelope. He's got a Prophet 10. He was actually asking me about good chorus pedals to pair with this Prophet 10. So we were talking about that last night, in fact. Another giveaway of this resonance compensation is just how much signal you lose as you crank the resonance on the Prophet 12 versus similar amounts of resonance on those two patches, but the resonance just comes forward so much more. So I want to jump on. So I'm going to write another basic patch, and we're going to return this sort of to a basic patch. So we're going to turn the cutoff all the way open, amplifiers, and now what I want to do is turn release all the way off on this. And we'll go to sawtooth waves here. So we've got sawtooth waves and an octave apart. Let's go ahead and do the same thing. So let's turn the output level all the way up. On some synths, you don't want to do that. On this synth, I think you want to crank the shit out of the oscillators and maybe even use drive. Yeah, you just kind of want to take this thing further out of tune. that drive is so critical to getting the sound, because the oscillators without that drive just do not. And now they sound amazing. There is such a thing as like being a snappy envelope snob, by the way. Like, I do get it that there are differences. And there's also a difference between the latency of how fast you hit a key versus the number of milliseconds that the CPU checks to see the state of everything. I think on a Prophet 5, it's like 5 milliseconds, which is like a relatively long period of time. And no one complains about envelopes on a Prophet 5, but that is a thing. Like the envelopes only update every 5 milliseconds or something like that. Here, we're kind of in a, So I'm going to bring the drive back a bit because it feels like cheating. Yeah, I think it sounds great. We never even talked about the analog distortion, so like... So that's like another thing that the Prophet 12 has up its sleeve. So this is digital distortion at the oscillator level fed into the filter. This is analog distortion after, and I believe it's doing basically that mini Moog trick. So let's hear how awesome that sounds again. I mean, again, kind of comparing the two, what little quibbles I might have about the oscillator section sounding a little JP8000 to my ears, and then you do that, and it's like, it doesn't matter, does it? I'm happy to hear, Bill, that you got a dead on arrival Prophet 600 back to life from Switched On in Austin. Everybody has the best things to say about that technician. Something I want to do on the website is get together a list of synth techs that are trustworthy and that do a good job, because I think people need to know that they're out there. A big fear of buying vintage synths is like, they're like, well, what do I do if something's wrong with them? And it is probably the case that there's a great vintage synth tech living not that far from you. Might be a little drive, but it's probably worth it for some of these ancient machines. So let's make a bass line. So we can get pretty tight here, right? Let's see over here if we bring the... Can you guys hear the aliasing there? I mean, it's not a bad thing. I'm not but I like it, actually. But do you guys hear that sound? How tight can we get? Basically just a gate. Let's see how tight we can get here. Yeah, so I think this is showing that the envelopes are not... The snap on that is incomparable. It has to do with the envelope shape too, which we can modify with glee. So we could have amp envelope shape and filter envelope shape. So I go to, what is it? To tape or from tape? Press 2 tape plus 55. Yeah, so I've got it to fast. Yeah, so I mean this is as good as it gets, I think. Could I isolate the aliasing? Interestingly, no. You have to, like, it is the low frequencies coming through that's doing something in the synthesizer that causes it to alias. Which is mysterious to me, because as far as I could tell, this synth has an analog signal path after the low pass filter, right? So it's all digital up until that. And then it goes through the high pass filter, the analog high pass filter, analog low pass filter, amplifier, digital tune feedback, digital delay. So with a lot of synths like this, what happens is that as you go through that, if you have the effects off, it's completely analog. I think on this synth, it must go through an A to D again, no matter what, because otherwise you wouldn't hear that aliasing. I would love to check out a JV 1080, actually. I've been looking at like an XP30 or something. I've just got too many synths. Let's see if we can do that same sound down here. So the envelope amount goes way up on this synth. Oh, it sounds really good. I mean, in this example, I think the Prophet 12's just smoking it, right? That's some resonance. It's interesting. I really like the resonance character on the Prophet 600. It's very, very, very similar to a Matrix 6. So if you want a Prophet 600 sound, but without the bugs, and also without the knobs, which is not good, Matrix 6 is a great option. God, that sounds good. Whoa, I didn't mean to do whatever I did there. So, yeah, I mean, I wonder if I've bored you guys too much, but I could listen to this shit all day. Little differences add up. I mean, without the resonance, the Prophet 12 is just fucking huge. That sounds so good. You know. God, it sounds good. Now, as you bring in the resonance on the Prophet 600, I can't believe that's only 2 oscillators. It sounds so super sawish. Up here, very close. It's unfortunate that the Prophet 12 struggles with high end so much. It really is just not what this synthesizer does well. And again, when it comes to some of my favorite synths, like the Poly 6, it is the lack of extreme brightness that makes it sound so good. I can't help but shake the feeling that with the Prophet 12, it's not quite able to get there in terms of its limitations, you know, and that's a frustrating thing because I would really be happy to have the Prophet 12 clean sweep the Prophet 600 because I fucking hate this thing sometimes. It's a love-hate relationship, you know, like all good marriages are. It's a beautiful sounding synth, obviously can do a lot. I do want one more thing. I want to try one more thing before we call it a night tonight. I want to look at the filter FM because that could change my mind. But you can't count the Prophet 600 out in terms of sonics, in my opinion. What do you guys think? I don't know if I'm losing my mind here. 40 Thieves, how are you doing? So cool that you're able to do that. So you could take a desktop evolver. Is that only one voice? Or is there a poly evolver, a rack mount poly evolver, and a desktop poly evolver? Or does it just add one voice to make it a 5-voice synth? Yeah, I think drive is critical. We also have other modes here, like decimation and hack, which basically adds like really gnarly aliasing. Let's and then hack is sample rate. Which is super cool. What I want to do now is route, assign mod source, and let's go to oscillator 1 and assign mod destination, low pass filter, and increase. Or we could use oscillator 2. Oh, this is interesting. This is very interesting because to my ear, I'm hearing a little bit of that. I heard a demo of the Waldorf Q, and I thought it sounded great. I was like, wow, that might be the best sounding virtual analog synth. But getting into the filter FM, that lower sample rate, internal clock of the CPU, gives it a different, potentially a different type of sound. Let's see what happens when we use oscillator B routed to the filter. So this is the, here we go, using oscillator B routed to the filter. Let's see what we get. So this is interesting too, because one of the things I don't like about the Filter FM on the Prophet 600 is the cutoff only goes so low, right? So you have to play this game of like using very little envelope amount. I agree with Pliskin there. I want the high end from the 12 and the low end from the 800. Robert asks, is there a sweet spot, Dave Smith, if I only wanted one, or are they all too different? That's really tough. And part of what I'm trying to answer with this stream, because for me, I do love vintage analog synths. And I do think the Prophet 600 has certain advantages over the modern sequential stuff. I don't think it's worth the headache, though. I think of all vintage synths out there, if you were to... Dave Smith Instruments, also known as Sequential, also known as Sequential Circuits, there's actually been 3 company names. They make such great interfaces and such great synths in terms of like how much fun it is to program with this guy, that this is a little finicky with the low parameter. Reason alone, it's probably 12. When I polled my viewers of this channel, about 300 people voted, and they said the Prophet 12 was the, comparing the Evolver versus the 12 is like the sweet spot, to answer your question. Dave Smith himself seemed to think the Prophet 12 was his favorite synthesizer that he made. Hard to know if that held up all the way until till he passed tragically. But certainly for the years after the Prophet 12 came out, and even, after COVID, he still spoke of the Prophet 12 with quite a bit of fondness. And I think the reason is because for what he was trying to do, this synth does it. Like, this goes all the way to where it would want to be. It's just very exactly what you might want out of a synthesizer. So let's talk about the other synths. So an original Prophet 5 is very expensive, not a sweet spot. T8's unobtainium, Prophet VS unobtainium, or relatively unobtainable. Then we go into the modern stuff, and I would say it's the Poly Evolver, but for most people, I think the 4 voices might be limiting, but it could be potentially a more exciting synthesizer than the 12. I don't know. What do you guys think, chat? I think the 12 kind of represents like the most you can do in terms of modulation and features like the tune feedback and the 4 tap delay lines and things like that. When it comes to after that, I think TO5, the Oberheim version, is a very sweet spot. Some people would prefer the Take 5 as they prefer the Prophet sound. To me, I think just the ability to have that multi-mode filter is worth it. CEM style filter. What else would be sweet spots? I don't know. I mean, a lot of the modern sequential stuff is very expensive. Oh, and the Prophet Rev 2, I think the Prophet Rev 2 is probably the overall sweet spot, if we're being honest. I don't know what you guys think. What do you guys think is the sweet spot? Yeah. That's pretty good. Wow. What an incredible sound there. So, what do you guys think? Do you think, which of the two would you prefer? Yeah, definitely a fun way to end. And I also think revealing. I think it goes to show, you know, at first I felt there was a little bit of a inadequacy to the filter FM on the P12, but what I felt by the end there was if there was a resolution issue or something like that, that the inflexible nature of the Prophet 600 made it maybe not worth it anyways. You know, like, it's a cool sound, it can do good stuff, but yeah, I think the Rev 2 is the sweet spot. What do you guys think? All day for you, Adapt. Why don't we go ahead and put it in the chat real quick? I just like to know P12 versus P600. We'll start the poll. And I want you to answer not on what's the better synth, but when it came to like the filter and the oscillators, which sounded better, you know, because the Prophet 12 is the better synth, period. Just like in terms of like what can be done with it, the Prophet 12 is better. I think the curious thing or the interesting thing is, you know, is there some magic in the Prophet 600 that the Prophet 12 doesn't all the way get there? And I think in that case, that's possible. You know, there is something about the analog oscillators, and it might kind of lean towards that I might be one of those polyevolver freaks, you know, because the polyevolver has the Prophet VS waves in it. And of course, we didn't even, Jesus fucking Christ, we didn't even touch on the wavetables and stuff. So, I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. But having said that, the wavetables in the Prophet 12 are very basic. There's not that many of them, and you can do some basic morphing, but it's nothing like mod wave or hydrosynth or serum even. You know, it's some pretty simple stuff. Let's see. Wow. All right, I'm going to close the vote in a second. It's like 100% Prophet 12, right? Isn't this? Yeah, I guess yes was supposed to be 12. That was very silly of me. And considering that the 600 is pretty expensive too, relatively speaking. Oh, awesome, Johnny Morgan, how you doing? I've been watching your channel going back. I actually watched your like sort of intro to the Jupiter 6 video yesterday. I was watching those. Really, I love the vibe of your channel. I've said it before. But yeah, this will be a fun one to check out. I had some technical issues at the beginning of the stream. I'm hoping they'll be able to edit that out with this goddamn microphone. Sebastian says, no magic that would be heard in a song. Let's not forget these sounds get buried in a song rarely on its own. You know, for me, Seb, yes, but I do find that the magic inspires the musician. You know, when I heard some of those sounds, it made me want to go make a track. I was like, damn, that feels good. So there's an element of it where maybe the magic doesn't always translate to the listener, but I do think it translates to the artist in a lot of ways. But it depends. You know. What a fun one, though. Yeah, I think we're all fans of Johnny Morgan for sure. So hopefully everybody enjoyed tonight's stream. Again, sorry for the technical issues. When I edit it, hopefully I'll be able to suck that shit out, flush it away. I will be selling the Prophet 600. I already had decided on that before this stream. It's just not my favorite synth to use, and I think it's going to be someone's favorite synth. And it kind of can get into that Jupiter 6, like, sort of bright, cold analog, which is a good thing. I like a cold analog synth. I have a couple of warm analogs. Like, you really only need, like, one warm analog, like a Poly 6 or Jupiter 4. After that, I quite like the synths that have the range to get bright, to open up and give you that sizzle on the top end of the oscillators. So I'm glad you enjoyed it, Hypothesis. I think that the Versus streams are the most valuable streams we do here on this channel, the most valuable videos. They don't perform well at all as far as the fucking algorithm is concerned. It's better when I do something like, the Roland JX8P is the best vintage synth you've never heard of, or, you know, everybody's heard of it, but you know what I mean. Like that, you focus on one synth or whatever, it does better. But I think it's more valuable because when you hear, like I always say, one synth on its own, they all sound good. It has to be a particularly bad sounding synth to not sound good on its own. It's when you hear it against another synth that you start going, oh, you know, there are some things that don't sound quite as good on one synth as the other. And tonight we were talking about two very good synths. You know, I don't think there's anybody who would say one of them's a bad synth. The Prophet 600 has bad envelopes, and it has some bad parameter, you know, some things that give you annoyance, but it's still a great synth. It's still a legendary synth. Adapt Manipulate, I wanted to get it done this week. I'm waiting on one thing to arrive in the mail. So I might be able to shoot it next week if everything goes well. Just because I could shoot it doesn't mean I can edit it in time to have it up for the following weekend. So, with that, I promise we'll do a studio tour. I really like how the studio feels right now. It feels really complete for me. I'm very excited about the fact that it's really where I want it to be. And now buying a new synth is torturous because, as many of you guys know, I refuse to become a collector of synths. If I can't have them on and playable, I don't want them. I want to set them free and let the world enjoy them. And I'm getting to the point where it's like, it's now painful to get rid of a synth. So, yeah. Yeah, if Prophet 12 owns Snowflake Prophet 600 and it'll get views. Yeah, it's, and I'm not averse to trying to use... Look, I am trying to make this dream my career. Full disclosure. I would love in some way or another, and there's great companies like Polyverse that have actually paid me to make videos for their channel. I appreciate them. When you click on a Museo subscription from my channel, I get a commission from that. I get like $10 or something. And of course I sell products, my samples of, my vintage synths and stuff. But I'm trying to do it, and the YouTube ad revenue and everything. So I will clickbait if I can. Like if I can bait someone into clicking on my fucking video, I will. I just won't do it in such a way that like the expectation won't be reached, hopefully. And I try to pull people in as cleverly as I can. And I'm sorry if it's annoying. I think it's annoying too. I've seen people post like this fucking guy with his fucking face and the arrow pointing and all of that. I'm like, and I've responded to people whenever I see it in the vintage synth groups or synth groups in general. I'm always like, I hate that shit too. I would love to just do a thumbnail and it's just a picture of the synth and for as many people to click on it as when I do all of the tropey stuff. But they don't. You guys, the people who make this channel what it is, the filthy scum, you guys out there who watch the stream every Wednesday, you guys watch no matter what. I appreciate you guys. But there's some crazy number of people who at least click on one of my videos every month. It's like close to 10,000 people or something. So I have to target those normal vanilla people out there. So yes, this is not a collection because I could turn them all on and play them all. It's a great jacket. Again, Brando, if you're listening, thank you very much. Xena, thank you very much. It was a gift. A very good stripper neutral jacket. Yeah, I try my best. It's hard. I don't get many paid gigs. That's one of the problems with being a vintage synth tuber. They want you to sell the modern stuff, and I do. When they send it to me, I try to. I try my goddamn best. Sometimes synth companies have sent me stuff, and like I said, I will just turn down a company if I think it's not a good idea. It is fucking rad. Yeah, no, it's very good. So, anyways, guys, I think that's a good place to call it for this evening. Let's all save up for some, the new Wolfgang Palmer $10,000 synth. Scum cheers, you guys. Continue to be excellent, and I will see you in the next video.